Hello YouTube! I am a little out of practice doing this actually because this is going to be my May-June reading wrap-up, and I think the last video blog I posted was actually my March-April reading wrap-up. But I've read like 8 books since then, and I still really enjoy making these videos even if I'm not making a lot of other types of videos, so let's do it. So the next book I read was an audiobook called Brain on Fire, My Month of Madness by Susanna Cahalan. And this book was amazing. And it was a personal memoir about a girl who something weird starts happening to her and her brain. Like, she goes from being this really successful journalist to someone locked away in a psych hospital because she can't even do kind of normal cognitive things, and nobody knows what's going on. She sees a ton of doctors. They keep misdiagnosing and putting her with other epilepsy patients and people who have similar things going on but not the exact thing, and then she finally finds this doctor who's able to identify what it is that's going on, and finds out that there's a lot of other people who've had this exact very specific problem happen to them. I can't remember what the name of the thing is because it's a very scientific name. But this book is actually written by her, and it kind of incorporates things that she had written down and things that her dad had written down, and kind of interviewing people that she had encountered along the journey and getting to see hospital security footage. There's just so much detail into this girl trying to reclaim her identity in this month that she sort of lost from herself. It's fascinating, it's heartbreaking, but ultimately she gets better, and so it's just this amazing story, and the fact that she's a journalist and was able to sort of document her own spiral into madness was just so awesome. The next book I read was called The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This is a book that had been on my list for a long time, but then my boss's boss at work messaged me one day and was like, "You read young adult books, right?" And I was like, "Yes." And she was like, "You have to read The Hate You Give, it's amazing." So I did. I also listened to the audiobook of this one. This book is about a 16-year-old black girl named Star Carter who's at a party with her friends, and her and one of her friends leave, and they get pulled over by the cops, and they're not really doing anything wrong. They're just leaving a party where a fight broke out, and her friend ends up getting shot by one of these cops. And so this spirals into this whole thing in this town, and she's sort of grappling with do I come forward and let people know that I was the friend in the car? How do I help get justice for my friend, but also I don't want the whole world looking at me? And it's a very timely and relevant story about things that are actually happening in this country, from the point of view of someone who was right there and saw it. And I think that it's a super, super, super important book for learning empathy and learning about people unlike yourself. Obviously, if you are like me and are white, really made me understand. It really touches on sort of why people riot when they're angry and how that can be completely mischaracterized. And it's such an important book. It's one of the best books I've read this year, and I really, really recommend that you read it because I definitely felt my mind expanding and understanding in a way that I think is really important right now. The next book I read was Miss Marvel by a bunch of people. G. Willow Wilson, Adrian Alfona. I actually have a signed copy. I met G. Willow Wilson at Free Comic Book Day last year, but it took me a long time to get around to this because sometimes I just forget to read graphic novels. Anyway, this is an awesome, awesome graphic novel. Miss Marvel is about, it's like a retelling of the Miss Marvel story, with this girl named Kamala Khan. She's a Muslim teenager who finds out that she's Miss Marvel, and that is a problem because her parents don't even let her leave the house often. They think she's sneaking out to go to parties when really she's going to save the world. It's super good, and it's interesting because I really don't enjoy superhero comics. This was actually even a stretch for me to read because I'm just usually not into the sort of bang pow kind of comic books, but this one's super awesome. I think it's a really good departure from sort of the standard Captain America thing. I don't know. I think it's just a really good step in the right direction for diversity in comics. So definitely worth a read if you haven't already read it. You probably have because it's been out for a while and I just took a long time. The next book I read is a funny story. So I saw that Daniel Handler, aka Lemony Snicket, was doing a talk at the local university bookstore over by the University of Washington, and I was like, I've never actually gotten to see Daniel Handler speak. That'd be amazing. So I grabbed Joe and I grabbed my friend Liz and I was like, we gotta go to this thing. Did not look up like what book he has coming out at all. I just decided this is great. I love this author. I'm gonna go do this. Turns out it was for a picture book called Goldfish Ghost, and almost everyone else in the audience were like small children and their parents. There were a few other like teenager-y types, but we were definitely the sore thumb sticking out, but it was amazing. First of all, Goldfish Ghost is super cute. It's this book that he collaborated on with his wife, Lisa Brown, and they are like the most adorable couple, by the way. They're just like interactions with each other were just perfection. So she illustrated it, he wrote it. They had this really cute way of interacting with the kids while they were doing their kind of thing at the bookstore. It's about loneliness, basically, and it's about how, like, it might be okay to be alone, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're lonely, but if you are lonely, it's okay, and there's, like, coping ways to deal with being lonely. Such a poignant thing for kids to learn about. But they also had this theme where Daniel Handler would just say, "Death is everywhere," and he had this whole like room full of small children. Like his answer would be like, and why does that character in the picture look sad? And the kids would be like, 'cause death is everywhere. And it was so funny and also a little creepy watching all these kids chanting that death is everywhere and all around. But definitely recommend seeing Daniel Handler speak, especially if it's in front of children, because it was just so funny. And there were times where he was just like walking around the room aimlessly and just being so weird, and the kids would be like, "What is he doing? Why is he doing that?" And then some kids would be like, "'Cause adults are weird." It was amazing. It was like the best author like speaking evening I've ever been to. The next book I read was The Help. I actually listened to this one on audiobook. It is by Kathryn Stockett. I really liked this book. I have been trying to read a lot of books that are about people that are not the same as me, because I know a ton of stuff about people who are the same as me, and I want to learn about people who are not the same as me. This is a book that takes place back in the 60s. It's about this town. I think it's in Jackson, Mississippi. It's been a little bit since I read it, but it's about all of these sort of like semi-affluent white women who have maids, and these maids are like taking care of their children and cooking their dinners, and they don't necessarily treat them very well. And so there's one girl in this group of friends who decides, like, she's single, she doesn't really have anything to lose, but she really wants to write, and she really wants to write something that she feels strongly about, and she decides that she wants to work with these maids to kind of write the story from the point of view of the maids of what it's like to be the help in the South. And it's this whole thing where the maids are really scared to take part in this because they could get in so much trouble, and way more trouble than she would ever get in. And it's told from the point of view of a lot of different characters, and it's just done really well, and I really liked it. And my only critique after the fact is that I'm like really disappointed that this book was actually written by a white woman. And so I was kind of looking into this, and I guess like she grew up in the South and she also had a maid, and so like she's telling kind of her story of, there's so much about what it meant to like be a maid and like be a like black person in the 60s in the South, that I just wish that there was like actually that input from the people who that was actually their experience. I obviously don't know anything about Kathryn Stockett's like past and everything. I know that there was some controversy around like her naming one of the characters Aibileen, and she had a maid whose name was very similar, and there was like some sort of lawsuit thing. So that's a little bit disappointing, but ultimately it is a very good book, and it does feel very true, but I can't possibly know that because it's not my experience. So anyway, I loved the book. I hope that it is actually like spreading actual experience, but there's not really any way for me to know. So I would love to read more books like this that are actually kind of own voices books, so if you know of any, please let me know, because I would feel a lot better about that. The next book I read was A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab. No, This is A Gathering of Shadows. The next book I read was A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab. I actually don't have the hard copy of that. I grabbed the wrong book. I listened to that on audiobook with Joe. It's a third book in the Shades of Magic series. We had been listening to all of them together in the car. It took us a very long time because sometimes we don't listen to audiobooks, sometimes we just like chit chat, and it's like a 19-hour book. But it was very good. We joked often that it should be called A Conjuring of Blood instead of A Conjuring of Light because like it's so violent and there's just like so many deaths, both like characters we care about deaths and also like just rando death. Sometimes we would do like the death count on the way to work. Like, all right, only 18 people died on the way to work today. That's a great way to start out our week. But ultimately it was a great wrap up. I don't want to spoil it actually. You know what? You should just read it. It was great. The next book I read was also an audiobook. It was Orphan Island by Laurel Snyder. This is a book that I just randomly saw at Barnes & Noble. And was like, that sounds really interesting. And so I actually just went and got the audiobook. But this is a book about this is such a weird book. It's about this island, and there's 9 children on this island, and once a year, a boat comes and brings a small child, and the oldest child leaves in the boat, and then the youngest child stays on the island. And it's this kind of whole cycle where the oldest child is sort of in charge of the youngest child, and the oldest child is the elder, and they just sort of like live on the island, and then the oldest one leaves, and no one really knows what's outside the island. I couldn't, even after having finished this book, get a sense for whether this was like magical realism, fantasy, or some strange other reality of like contemporary. I don't know. I cannot tell. This book, I don't really want to spoil anything because it was super interesting. But the end, like I had so many questions still. I have so many questions that I need answered. And I did read something, the author mentioned that she hadn't planned on writing a sequel, but now that the book's out and she's like seen how people are reacting, she's actually considering writing a prequel, which would kind of tell us more about this person who was on the island like many years before, possibly when this whole thing started. But I just like wanted the book to answer some more of my questions. So I'm still sort of unclear on whether or not I actually liked it, or if I'm just like so frustrated with the lack of information. I don't know. The last book that I have completed in the last 2 months is Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. This is nonfiction. It's a book that had been on my list for a while because it's a book that many people say is like a super awesome like writing sort of pep talk book. She has like a lot of good advice in the book and funny stories, and like so many of the little sections I was just like nodding along like yes, that's so great, and there's so many like good things that I have in my brain that are gonna like help me get my words out. She was just like, she's funny, and she also tells you the hard truth. If you like writing and you ever need like encouragement, definitely read that book. It's super good. I'm gonna probably read it like every year because it was that good. Those are all the books that I finished. I actually thought that I had read more books than that, but it was like 8 books. Like that's like kind of a lot of books, especially for people who are like working a full-time job and planning a wedding, and also it's summer, which for me means busier. I think for a lot of people that means less busy. But I'm in the middle of a bunch of books right now. So one of the books that I'm currently reading is The Careful Undressing of Love by Corey Ann Haydu. I'm only about like 1/4 of the way into this book. It's like unlike anything I've ever read, and I really like it. It actually sort of has like a We Were Liars kind of vibe, but it's also completely different. I don't know how to explain it, but this book is great and I'm loving it. I'm also in the middle of like 3 audiobooks. One of Us by Karen M. McManus, which is a book about these like kids who are in detention, but like none of them actually got detention, so they're kind of framed, and then like something terrible happens to one of their friends, and then I get the gist that they think it was one of them, but I'm unsure because I'm only like 15 minutes into it. I also finally started reading The Cuckoo's Calling by Robert Galbraith, aka J.K. Rowling, and I'm like 2 hours into it and I'm loving it so far. I don't know how I waited so long to read this book because it's like everything I love in a book. I'm reading The Partly Cloudy Patriot by Sarah Vowell, I think is how you say her last name. This is a nonfiction book about sort of like being an American and politics and government and history and stuff. And she's super funny, so I'm really enjoying it. I'm trying to read more books to kind of learn about like how our country works and history and everything, and she's a very approachable writer, and so she's a very good place to start, and that is what people told me, and they were right. So that is everything I'm reading right now. I will be back with another one of these in another 2 months. I also started a readathon called Reading Bingo. If you didn't find out about it, we just did one, but if you want to be alerted about the next one, you can follow Reading Bingo on Instagram, because that's where I'm hosting them, and it was super fun, and thank you to those of you who did participate, because it was great. Sorry that I haven't been making very many videos, but just kind of a lot of other things going on in my life right now, and YouTube hasn't been as much of a priority, but I do like you guys, and I've been funneling my creative energy into my blog, KristinaHorner.com, and my Instagram and Twitter. So those are the places that I'm still pretty active all the time. So thank you guys, and I will see you next time. Bye.